Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the July episode of the Divorce Support Club with me, Claire Macklin. And I'm joined today by Natasha Alsop from Walker Family Law and Becky Barnes, who is from Becky Barnes Style. And she has come to talk to us about clothing and how you can use your clothing to shift how you feel, to feel better, and all those kinds of things, and to create a new you after your divorce. Without further ado, let's get into the introduction. So, Natasha, first of all, could I just ask you very quickly to introduce yourself?
Yes, Claire, obviously Becky. Yes, I'm a solicitor here at Walker Family Law, associate solicitor in the divorce and children team. So, divorces, finances, and helping with children as a result of those divorces.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And I'm Claire Macklin. I'm a breakup and divorce coach. I work with clients to help them navigate their emotional way through separation and divorce. And Becky, it would be brilliant if you could introduce yourself too, if that's okay, please.
Of course. Hello, welcome. I'm Becky. I work as a sustainable stylist, and that's basically helping women who feel a little bit stuck to have the confidence to express who they are through their clothes on the outside as a really authentic way of showing who they are on the inside. And so it's about actually not following trends, but tapping into who you are and wearing the clothes that bring you joy and express who you are.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So let's get into the content because we have so much to talk about here. When Becky and I were planning this session, we decided we're going to split it into sort of three sections. We're going to talk first of all about the early days of separation and divorce. Then we're going to talk about sort of during the divorce process, how you can use your clothes to help then. And then we're going to talk about post-divorce and the next chapter afterwards. So in those early stages, whether you are the person who's initiated a divorce or you're on the receiving end of news that your partner wants to separate, there are bound to be a whole raft of emotions that you're probably going to be experiencing. You know, whether that separation was a choice or it's come as a shock, it's highly likely that your emotions are going to be all over the place. So Becky, I just wondered, how can our clothes help us during this stage of really sort of high emotional, emotional feelings?
It's such a good question. And I think our clothes are something that we interact with every day. We put them on every morning, they touch our skin, they literally touch our body, and yet we don't think about them as a tool, as something that can help us through lots of different situations. And I think a breakup can often mean disengagement from certainly family members, sometimes friends, sometimes social events, and we maybe withdraw a bit. And our clothes can provide a huge level of comfort for us in those situations. And if you find yourself needing that comfort, then think about fabrics, because they are really actually physically touching our body. Think about things which are soft to touch, maybe things that are snuggly or warm. And I know certainly in the pandemic as well, lots of people turned to leisure wear because they were so comfy to wear. And essentially what you're doing when you're wearing comfortable, soft clothes is literally giving yourself a hug.
Yeah, I remember those very early days, and actually certainly I needed to feel softness, to feel that comfort. And I guess colour as well can perhaps come into this in terms of the sorts of colours that can offer you a level of comfort at this point too.
Definitely. I mean, everyone will have a different relationship with colour, and colours will mean different things. But in general, there are a few colours which are going to help you out in this situation. So if you're feeling very anxious and you perhaps need to calm yourself down, then good colours to wear are within the blue and green palette. They're very easy on the eye and again, have a very calming effect on your body. You also might want to do a little bit of self-love and a bit of introspection. And so pink is good to wear for that as well. It's just bringing the focus back on you and just gently telling yourself that it's okay, it's going to be all right. And there's also, think about soft purples and lilacs as well, because they're also great colours for, again, lowering stress, lowering any anxiety levels that you might have. And so just think about how you can incorporate those into your clothes. You don't have to go head to toe in all those things. You might just want a scarf in it, or you might want to do your nails in it, or you might want to have a piece of jewelry. But it's just understanding that those colors are calming, they're grounding, and they help bring you back into alignment.
Mm. It's really interesting how the different things can make you feel. I remember really early on when I was separated the first time, that my clothes became something which helped me um, to feel more, as well as feeling less anxious, they helped me in a way to feel more dignified, to feel more confident, particularly when I was doing things like meeting my ex-husband because he was picking up the children, or things like that, where I was even going into work. There are other colours out there that can help you perhaps to feel dignified or to feel stronger. What colours would you devise then?
Yeah, if you're wanting sort of power colours or colours that are giving you gravitas, then the two classic ones are red and navy. But as I
Mm,
said at the beginning, it's very personal to you. You might get
mm,
that feeling from something else. So it's like go inside, understand what you get your strength from. But red and navy are sort of classic ones. And you're right
mm,
in so much as our clothes absolutely have the power to either perpetuate how we're feeling. So if we're feeling a bit down in the dumps or sad or worried or whatever it is, if we don't put thought into our clothes, we will perpetuate that mindset and that mood. If we consciously think about what we're putting on and actively dress to change our mindset, then we can change our mindset. You know that if
mm,
you wake up and you're having a bad day and you just put on a rubbish outfit, it makes you feel even more rubbish. Whereas
mm,
if you reach for something which you know you love and just makes you feel so good when you put it on, it's an instant shift. You
mm.
instantly feel better.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's that kind of, when you're feeling low, don't put on your mankiest tracksuit and sit on the sofa. My clothes, certainly my first divorce, were hugely, hugely important in helping me to actually face every day. I would put on a pair of jeans that fitted well, and I would put on a nice top with them. I've got photographs of myself wearing a top that I used to have that had butterflies all over it, because it helped me to feel better, and it can change the way that you stand
For
and
sure.
the way that you show up when you're walking along the street.
Yeah, it's exactly that. There was a really interesting campaign that was put together by NHS nurses who recognized that when patients were wearing their pajamas, they took longer to recover. And their
Mm.
campaign was called End PJ Paralysis. So they
Wow.
realized that when patients got out of their pajamas, when they were essentially playing the role of a sick person, when they got out of their pajamas and into their own clothes, and even out of the bed and just sitting in the chair beside the bed, their recovery was faster and more effective. And so, again, it's about understanding that what we're wearing is sending signals to our brain about the state that we are in. So we can either reinforce the state we're in, or we can trick it into thinking we are actually something else.
That's amazing. I'd not heard of that before. The end PJ paralysis. I think that's brilliant. And it just goes to show how what we're wearing has such an effect on how we're thinking, how we're feeling, how we're standing. And then when you change how you're feeling with your clothes and how you're standing, then you come across different too. You walk differently down the road. Um,
Exactly that. It's a really powerful thing when somebody stands in front of a mirror and likes what they see, because
mm,
their head goes up and their shoulders go back and they step into themselves, and they're essentially in their power. And that's
mm.
a very it's an incredible place to be when you're in that space, because it's going to carry you through those tricky situations you might find yourself in.
Yes. Talking of tricky situations, one of the other things that certainly happened to me, and I see happening to a lot of the people that I work with, is stress and weight loss in particular. So when my first husband left, I think it was about 6 weeks. I lost 2 stone. I just couldn't eat, and I see this happening with my clients as well. So you can't eat, or you feel sick, or you're eating tiny, tiny portions of things. And so I went down from, I think I was like size 12 before, and I went down, and in the end I was wearing kind of an 8 or sometimes even a 6, which was really too ridiculously small for somebody who's 5'6" like me. So I guess then my question from that would be, what do you do when nothing fits you anymore? I could look in my wardrobe and my clothes were hanging off me. What advice would you offer then?
I would say just put together a very small capsule wardrobe. And by that, I mean just a few key pieces which go with each other. So you need a minimum number of items to create a maximum number of outfits. So that just might be that you have a few tops, a few bottoms, and a few layering pieces. Pick a color palette, work within that, and then you will have combinations. You don't need that many things. So when I go in to talk to corporates about a work capsule wardrobe, if you have 5 tops, 5 bottoms, 5 layering pieces, and 5 pairs of shoes, so it's essentially just 15 items of clothing, you've got well over 600 combinations. So you start to see that when you're shopping smart and you're shopping within a capsule mindset, you can create multiple outfits from just a handful of pieces.
Mm, yes, really interesting. I remember at the time, my children were really little, so they were still at nursery, and the nursery advertised this kind of clothing swap thing. So I went to this clothing swap, and this was another way perhaps to get some new things into your wardrobe that actually do fit you now. I went to this clothes swap thing. I think we had to pay £1 to go in, and then you could pick up items in your size, and you had to donate a bag of your own stuff. So I took in a load of stuff that was too big and came home with a load of stuff that I then wore for the next 2 years for £1. Amazing. So look out for things like that.
Yeah, clothes swaps are brilliant. Charity shops are brilliant. Places like Vinted now are brilliant. You can just scroll when you're watching the TV or whatever you're doing at home if you don't have the time to traipse around the charity shops. So we're really lucky that we can access great quality secondhand goods at a very low price point. And I think it's just see this perhaps as a transitionary phase. We don't know where you're going to end up, but you need clothes every day. So you may as well just spend a little bit of time, money, and energy on investing in clothes that make you feel good to tide you through to whenever things might stabilize the other end.
Brilliant. There's some great tips in there. Thank you. So moving on to during the divorce process. So this is when you might be going to meetings, and you might have to be, negotiating with your ex-partner. Possibly you've got court hearings. You're thinking about how you're going to divide your assets and your belongings and so on. So how can you use your clothes then as a kind of tool to create the feelings that you might want then? The confidence perhaps that you need to walk into that meeting.
Again, it will be different things for different people, but it's about understanding, firstly, what you want to feel, and then secondly, what you've got which can generate that feeling. So for me, when I want to feel powerful, I like to wear things that are more tailored. I like things that have structure to them. So last week when I was presenting at UE, I wore a top which had enormous shoulders because I was literally building myself up. I was making my shoulders broader than they actually are because that's what I needed in that particular day. So it's about, what do you need? Do you want to feel empowered? Do you want to feel confident? Do you want to feel in control? Or what is it? And then what is going to give you that sense of feeling that you are craving or need?
And I sometimes advise clients, if they don't have anything in their wardrobe right now that fits that bill, go and buy yourself a mediation outfit so that you then anchor going to mediation or going to the meetings or whatever with that outfit. Or alternatively, you could buy something that you can wear underneath. Nobody actually needs to see some of these things. I remember doing a workshop with a group of ladies once, and they set up a WhatsApp group afterwards. They called it the Red Knicker group because whenever they wanted to go into a meeting feeling particularly powerful, particularly confident, they would wear red pants because they knew they were there. It helped them to feel good, but nobody else needed to know. So some of this is not even stuff that you're showing to people on the outside. And I remember another lady who sewed a ribbon into her skirt. And so she could feel the ribbon and she could rub it when she needed to, but nobody else, again, needed to know that it was there. And I think
They're what I call the power amulets.
yes,
So
yeah.
it's
Tell us more about that.
yeah, it's something that you can reach for instantly to give you a boost. So for some people, it might be a pair of killer heels. For your clients, it was the red knickers or the ribbon. It might be a piece of jewelry that is very sentimental. It might be a bright red lipstick. It's something that you know has that almost instantaneous lift that you need. And we will all have something that will give us that. And again, it's really powerful to tap into what that is. And that will help power you through those tricky situations.
Yes. So I guess, this necklace, I wear this necklace pretty much every day when I'm coaching because it helps me to feel like I've got that hat on right now, I'm wearing my coaching hat. I suppose it's something very similar to that, isn't it? When we were talking, you talked about something called enclosed cognition. I'm really interested to find out a little bit more about what that is and how that can help people.
Yeah. So again, this is along the lines of clothes can impact us more than we may give them credit for. And there was a very famous experiment where a group of people were gathered together and they all set a baseline intelligence test, and their scores were recorded, and they were wearing their own clothes when the test was undertaken. Everyone was then handed a white coat to wear, and the room was divided into two. Half of the room were told that it was the coat of a painter and decorator. The other half were told that it was the coat of a brain surgeon. They all resat the test, and almost all of the candidates who were told they were wearing the coat of a brain surgeon improved their score. And those who were wearing the coat thinking they were a painter or decorator stayed the same or maybe did a little bit worse. Just the very act of putting on a coat and taking on the persona of either a painter and decorator or a brain surgeon was enough to physically impact someone's ability in a test. So I think it's really important that we recognize that and know that our clothes can physically impact our ability in court, in mediation sessions, etc. It can elevate the way that we are presenting ourselves and the outcome we are achieving.
That's so interesting, isn't it? So just by putting on a different item of clothing, which then makes you perhaps stand in a different way, think in a different way, helps you to perform in a completely different way. So this is
Yeah.
really worth thinking about, in advance and working out exactly what the right clothes are for you in order to perform at your best. One of the other things that I talk about with my clients quite a lot then is around visualizing yourself doing that. So if you are anxious about perhaps going into mediation or going to your court hearing or whatever it might be, imagine yourself in your mind wearing those clothes, standing how you want to stand, thinking how you want to think, saying the things that you want to say, and you kind of run through the scenario in your mind like a movie. And then when you get to the end, you watch yourself leaving the room and you notice how well you did. And then you rewind it and you run it through again and you just ask yourself, what could I do even better this time? So what shifts might I make to what I'm wearing, or how might I say something differently, or what different thought might I have, or how could I respond in an even better way? And then you run it through over again, and then you rewind, and you just you're running the visualization through over and over again. And you can practice this, that before you go to bed, you can practice it in the morning. You can practice it at odd periods through the day, because your brain is so clever, it doesn't know the difference between something that you imagine and something that's real. And so when you get into the real scenario, your brain thinks you've already done this, and it helps it to do it even better. So I think when you combine your mind, your body, your clothes, your thoughts, you can be so much more capable, powerful, empowered than you might at first think.
Absolutely. And I think that when you take responsibility for these things, it's giving you an element of control to something that maybe you feel that you are not totally in control of. So it's looking at what can you impact yourself And then that should again help drive you through.
Absolutely. And you can sort of then start talking to yourself, can't you? And using kind of positive affirmations, I can do this. I've got all the resources that I need. I know that I've practiced. I know that I'm prepared. You can actually stand in front of a mirror perhaps and talk to yourself, remind yourself that you know all these things, that you've got these resources. Another thing that works for quite a lot of my clients is, let's say they're going into a court hearing, they take a picture of themselves into that hearing, of themselves at a time in their life when they felt whatever it is they want to feel. So I remember a client taking in a picture of herself standing on a beach in Australia during her gap year when she had felt really free, really empowered, and she was doing exactly what she wanted to do. And she took that in to remind herself of that feeling. So I guess you could also use that with your clothes. If there was something that reminded you of you when you were feeling what you want to feel, you could wear that or take that in.
Exactly that. And I think it's interesting as well when you suddenly have no constraints or considerations on you, because it's amazing the amount of people I work with who tweak their style to fit in with their partner, or to fit in with the things their partner likes, which might not be what they like themselves. And so it's when you don't have to consider that anymore, you can get right back into who you are. And so looking back at photos or items in your wardrobe that do represent that person who you are when there are no constraints on you can be quite insightful.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And I think then that impacts on how other people see you as well. So when, the impression that you are giving out and the feeling of confidence that you start to exude when you're doing all these things affects how other people experience you. And that can be really valuable when you're going into a meeting with your ex-partner and their solicitor, or you're going into a court hearing.
Agreed, totally.
Mm. So I think this leads us really nicely into well, actually, no, very quickly, I'm going to ask Natasha actually if there's anything legal that we need to think about here, because we've been talking about clothes, we've been talking about potentially buying some new things. Natasha, is there anything legally that people need to be thinking about at this point?
Well, firstly, it was quite interesting just listening to you, Becky. It's really, and Claire, just really insightful to think what what you're putting on in the morning and how that impacts your day. That was really interesting. Just coming back to something you've already said before I move on to that, actually, it's really common for clients to say to us, what should I wear at court? And that actually, not so much mediation, but certainly court, which to many people is a frightening prospect, and it shouldn't be, but it is. And understandably, sometimes they get focused on what should I be wearing and worrying about that. And I think that was interesting, Becky, to hear what you were saying about, what when you put something on and how that can make you feel. And for everyone, it will be different, I'm sure. For us as solicitors, we have a certain etiquette that we have to wear certain things to court, certain etiquette that we have to follow, but clients don't. And I always just say to clients, if you're comfortable, that's the main thing. Obviously, you are making an impression, so you have to bear that in mind. But I'm sure that you probably say the same, Becky, and trying to perhaps some people think, well, I ought to wear a suit, and they've never worn a suit, never put on a suit, and then they're uncomfortable the whole time. Or, someone who, wears heels and they don't normally ever wear heels. So being themselves and being able to concentrate on the day and what's actually going on rather than feeling uncomfortable in something that they're wearing that they wouldn't ordinarily wear. I'm sure, Becky, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's something you would suggest to clients as well.
Absolutely, because we talked about authenticity. You have to be you, and you can try and play the role of what you think somebody going to court should wear, but ultimately you have to feel comfortable, and you can look very presentable and very smart without having to be suited and booted and without having to do a killer heel. And so I think we sometimes feel that if we're wearing something which is comfortable, it's perhaps sloppy. And it's not the case. There are ways of presenting yourself very well and you looking very sleek and very credible and professional, whatever it is that you want to give off, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that full suited and booted that you might have in your mind as the traditional court attire.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And then, yeah, the legal sense. Well, in terms of clothing, that's quite interesting because I was mentioning this to Claire. When clients are going through the process of divorce, they are required at some point, whether that's just on what we call a voluntary basis or whether we're actually in court proceedings where you have to present it to the court, they have to put their evidence forward in writing in a financial statement. And in that financial statement, we do what's called a list of their income needs. So what they're spending at the moment, what actually they need to live on each month, and what they will need in the future, because that might change because they might go to a different home, or so the whole list of everything that you can think of that you're spending out every month or annually, and clothes is on that list. And actually it's something that probably gets ignored initially by many clients because they're focusing on what's really urgent. The mortgage needs to be paid, the water bill, the council tax, all these bills and things that just focus their mind. But over the year, clothes do add up. Some people spend a lot more than others. Some clients will have been used to buying designer outfits and very expensive clothes that they've done throughout the marriage. And then they say, well, what should I be buying now? Should that change? And actually we say, no, what did you spend? It might have to be adjusted, but you still need to look at that. Someone else might not realise that actually when they're picking up something they like for 20, 30 pounds here, that over the year that mounts up. So that will be required. So they will have to look at their clothing budget, and that's included then in what's called their income needs schedule. So that goes off to the other person. And if we're in contested proceedings, then off to the court. So it's just something to factor in. And as you say, Claire, earlier, there can be a change, can't there, in your whole wardrobe often. So initially, and then that has to change again if things change in the future. So you do need to factor that in terms of that aspect of the proceedings.
Something else that comes up fairly often as well in relation to clothes is, while I'm going through this process, am I allowed to keep spending on clothes? Am I allowed to keep buying myself clothes while we're going through this process? And bearing in mind that for some people that process takes, well, it's a minimum of 6 months, isn't it? But some people it takes a lot longer. What's your answer to that? What if I've been used to spending £500 a month on clothes? Say, should I stop? Should I keep going? What should I do?
Well, it depends on exactly what you say. What have you been used to doing? So if someone hasn't ever really bought expensive clothes and they're feeling upset about their divorce, husband might have left, for example, and they think, well, I've got these savings, I'm going to go out and just spend everything. I'm going to spend £10,000 on clothes this month. Then that would be questioned. If you suddenly changed your habits and looked at large capital sums going on designer brands that you would have never entertained previously, and actually you can't afford, that would be you'd be criticized for doing that. And there's ways in which the other person can say that money should effectively come back in, although that gets quite complicated, but you can. So sensible within reason, but actually if you've had a certain standard of living and you can still afford that on the money that you're getting in every month, so whether that's by maintenance or your own income or however that money's coming in, then that's the standard that you had during the marriage, and that's what you can look towards. Although often, eventually, that may change because of resources and how the money is split. But you shouldn't just stop saying, well, actually, I can't buy anything else now because we've separated, I'm going through divorce. I'll wait until this is all over and won't buy any clothes for X amount of time.
Yeah, and that's the one that I hear most often. It's the worry about spending in a way that you have always spent, in case that's criticised. So that's really helpful, I'm sure, for lots of people who are listening. Let's sort of think about now about sort of post-divorce, the next chapter, and thinking about the person that you are at the end of this process, because most of the people that I see aren't the person at the end of the process that they felt they were at the beginning, and they're certainly not the person they thought they were during their marriage. So this is it's quite an opportunity that you have in front of you now to really think about who you are. So Becky, I know when we were preparing for this, we talked about detoxing your wardrobe. So could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, as you say, it presents the perfect opportunity for a fresh start. And it presents the opportunity for re-evaluation of who you are, where you want to be, how you want to present to the world. And so as you're working through that, you just might like to take stock of where you currently are. And there are lots and lots of ways which you can detox your wardrobe. Some people will, I think you've done this, Claire, where you just literally clear everything out and have a big old pile and then you sort through it. That's the Marie Kondo kind of approach. I couldn't cope with that, and some of my clients just couldn't cope with that. And so you might just want to tackle it in smaller chunks. So it's like one day you think, right, I'm going to sort through my knitwear. And then another day I'm going to go through my shoes. And then another day I'm going to go through my trousers. And you can just break it up if doing it in one big go just feels too much, too overwhelming. But when you're deciding what to kind of keep and what to let go of, it's just, you will know whether you want it or not. You will know for a start if it fits or if it doesn't. If it doesn't fit, I suggest move it away. You will also know if you have a strong emotional attachment to it. If there is a really strong tie to the person that you're now separated with, it just might be too difficult to keep hold of it because you're always going to have that association. If you feel that you might be able to keep hold of it, what I would suggest is you think about, can you restyle it? So instead of wearing it the way in which you've always worn it or historically worn it, is there a way that you can change it up to give it that fresh feel so that it still remains in your wardrobe, but you don't have that association because you've created a whole new look from it?
Mm.
So it's about actually, can you do something different with what you have, but also you'll know, well, you knew, Claire, didn't you, what you wanted to keep and what had to go?
Yes. So I definitely went for the do this crazy one weekend thing. And I actually hired somebody to come and help me do it. I worked with a lady, Suzanne, who does sort of feng shui and helps sort of cleanse energies and things like that. So we literally took everything out of my bedroom, literally everything. Well, other than the bed and the literally the furniture, everything else came out. Empty drawers, empty wardrobe, nothing under the bed. And then we went through absolutely everything. We put it into 3 piles: throw away pile, or get rid of pile, possibly keep pile, and definitely keep pile. And it took us all weekend, but it was amazing once we had done it. Absolutely amazing. But I totally hear you. For some people that would just be too much, so they might want to do it little bit by little bit. The thing that really shocked her was when we moved the bed and there was sort of these dust balls, you know. So we cleared out all of those as well. I'm glad to say. But my bedroom has never gone back to how it was before. Since then, I'm now really conscious. Although I'm not somebody who every 6 months does another clear out again, because all too often I've got rid of something and then thought, oh, I really wish I had that 3 or 4 years later. Um, but yeah, so releasing the things that you no longer want that connection with can be a really powerful thing to do.
Agreed. It can be very cathartic having a good clear out, shifting the things that no longer serve you, shifting the things that no longer feel like you're the person that you have grown into and developed over this time period. And by shifting it, it just creates a new, fresh energy and it allows you to bring some new pieces in if you want to. But I think there's something about not getting rid of things too quickly. Sometimes I say to clients when we're moving stuff out, just put it in a spare room or box it up and put it in the loft and sort of have a use by date on. Keep it for 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, whatever it is. And if during that period you're craving it and you want it or need it, get it back out. But then after that use by date that you've picked, if you haven't reached for it, then you're good to let it go.
It's really good advice as well. There'd be nothing worse than regretting some of that getting rid of things.
Yeah.
What are the kind of options if, let's say, you've got your big pile of things you want to get rid of? What are some of the options that you can do to get rid of those things to pass them on? Because we don't want to advocate filling up landfill here. So what are some of the perhaps more sustainable options for people?
Well, you've got your good old local charity shop, but have a think about what you're donating, because only around 15 to 20% of donations go on to be sold in a charity shop. The vast majority of donations they get just end up in the rag bin. They cannot sell anything that is dirty, tired, broken, etc. So only give things which are in good condition. If things are in not so great condition, then maybe think about textile recycling. Can you cut things up for use as rags, etc.? You may also want to try selling some of your things, and depending on the value of it, then that will direct where you're going. If they are middle of the road things, you might want to try something like Vinted. If they are more designer, you might want to try a pre-loved designer boutique or dress agencies that will sell on your behalf. You could also try higher end pre-loved sites like Vestiaire Collective, who will do authentication for your potential buyers if they're worried about investing money in something which they're not sure is there. But then there's also other ways to consciously rehome if you don't want an income from it. So there's a site called Give Your Best where you can upload your items and refugees can say which pieces they want and you would send it off to them. So you know it's definitely going to somebody who A, wants it and who B, needs it. I've also just packaged up and done a drive on office wear because there's been a shift from formal wear into slightly more casual wear in the work context. But there will always charities, organisations. So in Bath, we have First Impressions. Nationally, we have things like SmartWorks, who take office appropriate clothes and help clothe people who are going for interview. And then when they're successful, they can have a capsule wardrobe put together from donations for free. I know that you've done something really lovely with your wedding dress, Claire, haven't you?
Yeah, so my first wedding dress, yes, I wasn't quite sure what to do with it. It lived in a box for quite a long time in a cupboard. And I thought I don't really need this anymore. I want to do something nice with it. So somebody told me about this charity where they take wedding dresses and they turn them into little outfits for babies who are either stillborn or who die when they're very young, and they create these beautiful outfits for those babies to wear. So I sent it off to there. And I actually you then receive back an email with little pictures of the outfits that they've made from your dress. And I just thought that was a really lovely thing to do, to give comfort to somebody else from something that for me didn't serve me at all. So hopefully it served those parents really well. So yeah, I sent it off to there.
That's lovely. There are also lots of charities. Again, there's one called Wishing Well, who put together weddings at very short notice for terminally ill clients, and they will organise weddings. And so they're always after dresses. And there are specialist charity shops. So there's branches of Oxfam that take in wedding dresses. I've dressed a bride, and we've got a gorgeous secondhand wedding dress from their shop in, I think it was over in Chippenham Way. 10 of Us on the Gloucester Road, if you're Bristol based, has an upstairs room entirely dedicated to pre-love, prom and bridal. So there are places that you can rehome things that might not necessarily have a natural home.
And I think this brings us on to things like wedding rings as well, doesn't it? So, what to do with your wedding rings. So I eventually sold my first wedding, my wedding rings, and I bought a ring that I now wear on my other hand with the proceeds from that. My second wedding rings I've still got hanging around, so I'm not quite sure what to do with them. So perhaps we could talk about some ideas to do with those. And also, Natasha, there might be some legal things that people might need to think about in terms of wedding rings and jewelry. So maybe we should cover that off first.
Yeah, no, that it's just to be mindful of it really, and it often depends on the value. So engagement rings and wedding rings, actually, particularly engagement rings, come up quite frequently, where it's difficult for the person who has the ring to know, well, it was a gift to me, so does that mean I don't need to disclose it, or it won't be taken into consideration in the divorce? It's mine, it was a gift. Similarly in terms of the wedding dress, if it was a very expensive wedding dress, well, it was my dress, what do I do with that? So in respect of those, they are still matrimonial assets, so they still get taken into consideration. So depends on the value. So if you have a particularly expensive engagement ring, for example, that may well, go towards purchasing a car or some other asset which is needed. And so it does have to be disclosed. It depends if you've got lower value items and it's the second-hand value, and often this gets confused. At the start of the proceedings or negotiations, you'll have an example where a husband will say, well, that engagement ring was £5,000. You are going to have £5,000 less from the overall assets of the marriage. And it doesn't work like that. It's what the second-hand value is. So not the insurance value. Go to a local jeweler, go to a few and say, if I were to to sell this now to you and change it into cash, what would you actually give me? And ideally, you want that in writing as well to get them to do an email or something to say that this is how much we'd look to give you, because that will be required if it's of a value that needs to be disclosed. Or you can cash it in, but you just have to say, I've decided to sell it, and yes, I had £5,000 and this is the account that it went into, because you do have a duty to share that information. For items less than £500, though, that's slightly different. So when you come to do your financial statement in your divorce, we talked about, I know I'm going back to what you do in your divorce rather than post-divorce, but I know I didn't mention this earlier. That statement, you have to put belongings which are individually worth more than £500. So you might have, as Becky was saying earlier, you might be selling clothes that probably not worth individually more than £500 unless they're particular brands that can fetch that sum. So it's just those particular items, if they're still around when you're doing that statement or when you've started your proceedings, and you're going through this obligation to disclose your financial position, you do have to think about that. But yes, I think it's very individual, my experience of what clients say in terms of what they want to do post-divorce with it, whether they want to sell it, use it as an asset to meet their needs, it might be costs, it might be this, or whether they want to do something more unusual with it after, like engagement rings. Sometimes they want to hand down to the children of the marriage. Might have a daughter say, I'd like her to have that and I don't want to sell it. And they both agree that that's the best way for that to be dealt with and not to realise the asset. So any other ideas, Becky or Claire?
Yeah, it's a really interesting, wasn't it? So let's assume that all this jewelry's been dealt with through the divorce, and we're left with these items of jewelry afterwards. What are some of the things that you've seen people do, or some of the ideas that people have done, Becky, that you've come across?
Well, sometimes people just sell them and then use the money to get something that they really want, which might not even be a piece of jewelry. It might be a holiday, or it might be a piece of art or something. But then other people have reworked them into other pieces of jewelry, which are really quite beautiful and can be quite symbolic of a new start, particularly if things are weaved into the new piece that mean something to the person now. And that's a really lovely link from kind of past to present, but without any association that might be negative.
Yes, I can imagine that you could create something really beautiful with different symbols that might mean something else altogether. I'm now thinking, so something like the dragonfly, which to me symbolizes, rebirth and growth. You could give it a kind of a beautiful eye made of the diamond from your ring, or something like that. You could weave it into something that means something beautiful going forward.
Yeah, and sometimes people combine heirloom pieces. So somebody might have inherited some pieces from a mother or an auntie, and then it's all deconstructed, and then the little component parts are put back together into something completely new. But it's incorporating all those different elements, and it's so unique and so bespoke, and just a lovely thing to have.
Yeah, and you can make it into something that reflects, who the version of you is now, can't you? Who you are and how you want to show up in the world. And when we were talking before this, we were talking about new relationships as well, weren't we? In terms of new relationships and dating, and how your clothing can really help you with that. So what would be your top tips there?
Oh, well, as I say, when we talked about doing the wardrobe detox, it's a fresh start, isn't it? It's like you are in control of how you show up. You are in control of the clothes that you wear and how you want to present yourself. So what appeals to you now? What lands with you? What connects with you? How do you want to feel? And now that any possible constraints are off, what does that mean? So again, it's thinking about what makes you happy? How do you want to feel? How can we achieve that through our clothes? While we were waiting, we're just talking about, a really good example of like a before and after was back in the 90s when Princess Diana wore that revenge dress. On the night her husband went on national TV and admitted to adultery, she wore a dress which was that black silk off the shoulder, and she wore a choker, and it had a small silk train on it. And it was nothing that we'd ever seen her in before. And that was a very clear visual signal that this was a new chapter she was stepping into. And what's really interesting was that dress, she got it from that designer, and it sat in her wardrobe for 3 years prior to that night. And she never felt wear it because she felt it was a little too daring and a little too risque for her role within the royal family. So she was always just slightly muting herself and slightly conforming to what she thought she should be as a princess. And then once that line had been crossed, she could step into who she really wanted to be. And that dress was so impactful. And I think, you know, that just shows how you can just totally recreate yourself if you want to. But the
Yeah.
most
I wish,
important thing is that you're feeling authentic.
yeah, that sent shivers down my arms when you were talking about that. But I wish they didn't call it a revenge dress. That
Yeah.
kind of
Some,
links it back to the marriage. Then I would rather call it a, I don't know, a new me dress, or I don't know, can't think of the
yeah,
right
I
word
would
right
call
now.
it
But
something like the metamorphosis dress, you know, it's showing
yes,
the end of one stage and into another. You know, for me, revenge has this negative connotation. For me, that was an incredibly
exactly.
positive thing she did. It was, you know,
Yeah,
clean sheet.
the revenge dress makes it sound as though it's an angry thing, it's a reactive thing to him, where actually it was about her and about her showing up how she wanted to, which is absolutely not revenge.
No, it
It's
was
empowering.
I think it was a very empowering act for her. And I think she allowed some sort of protective shield that she had up to kind of be lowered and for her to be seen as who she was or who she wanted to be seen as.
Yeah, wonderful. Um, Before we end, Becky, I wanted to just to tell people a little something about the amazing shopping trip that I went on with you. I think I separated in the August in 2021, and went shopping with you in the November just before my birthday. And I went with a friend of mine. We went shopping with Becky, and I want her to tell us a little bit about her shopping trips in a minute because it was such an amazing experience. We went all up and down the Gloucester Road in Bristol, looking in all the different charity shops, and Becky picked out clothes that she thought would suit me. I picked out clothes that I thought would suit me, and sometimes she'd go, nah. Or sometimes she'd go, yeah, that one's okay. But it was a really, really good experience in terms of doing exactly what we've just talked about, you know, creating a new look potentially without having to break the bank. You know, I think I spent £100, and when I got home, I laid all the clothes out and they filled the entirety of my bed. And then I had to hang some off the mirror above it as well because there wasn't enough space to lie them all out. So it would be really good, Becky, to hear a little bit about the services that you provide that people might want to access as they sort of move into being the new them.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it was such a fun trip, wasn't it? It's one of my
Mm,
favorite things. Some people hate shopping. I love it. That's part of the reason I do it as a job. But the reason I take women charity shopping is because well, one, you can access it at a lower price point, and but two, because of its environmental benefits. So every time we buy something secondhand, we are making a significant contribution in terms of carbon saving and water saving. So there's so many plus points. But my job really is to bring a fresh perspective to the way that you're perhaps shopping and dressing, and just say, as somebody who's looking at you without any emotional ties, let's just try this. And
mm,
invariably, it's the things that I pick off the hanger and say, could you just try this on for me, please? And people look me up and down as if I've gone mad, but they humor me and try it on anyway. And they end up being the pieces that they love the most. And so it's just about creating that shift in mindset, moving people gently out of a comfort zone they might find themselves in, being open to experimentation and trying new things, and just helping redefine a style. If you're particularly if you're feeling stuck,
mm,
and you know, accessing clothes at a lower price point is a really low risk way of doing that.
It's a really low risk way, isn't it, of experimenting with things. And you know, some of the things that I bought when I went on the shopping trip that I did with you, you know, I've gone to incredible places. I went to Trooping the Colour last year and wore an outfit entirely from secondhand shopping, a pair of shoes that I found in London and a dress that I found when I was with you. You know, and I've since worn them to I went to Founders Day at the Chelsea Pensioners and wore one there as well. So you can find some incredible things that really can reflect who you become by, you know, going and experimenting in charity shops. So Becky, before we finish, could you just run us through the kind, where we can find you? Some of our watchers hopefully will get in touch with you and to find out what you can offer them. So if you could tell us a little bit about how they can find you and the sorts of services that you offer, that would be fantastic.
If you're on Facebook or Instagram, my handle is Becky Barnes Style. Similarly, my website is beckybarnesstyle.com. And I just offer a range of services to just give you a lift, basically, and help you when you're feeling a bit stuck, to give you some direction without it being full of rules around what you shouldn't do, but just to give you a framework within which to work, to ease some of the overwhelm, to make you more enthusiastic about your clothes, and to hopefully step into a space where your wardrobe brings you an enormous sense of joy every day, rather than maybe one of ambivalence or even stress.
Brilliant. So please do check Becky out. Her website is really good. There are lots of details of her services on there. And you can follow her on Facebook. And I think you have a group, don't you, as well? So if people wanted to join your group, you give lots of tips and things on there as well. So I just want to thank you, Becky, for coming along. You've shared such a huge amount of information with us today, and we've really enjoyed hearing you talk. So thank you ever so much. And Natasha, thank you too for your legal input. And we will see everybody next month.
Pleasure.
Thanks, Claire. Thanks for organising. Nice to meet you, Becky.
And you.